Astergate 12 was a lung that never fully inflated. It hung at the frayed edge of the heliotrope corridor, a smear of tachyonic trade routes, controlled by the rigid, glittering fist of the Aurelian Dominion. The station itself was functional, gray, and smelled of scrubbed ozone and nutrient paste. Banners bearing the stark, geometric sigil of the Purity Directorate hung from every gantry, reminding the station's inhabitants of the hierarchy. At the top were the Aurelians and the elder species. At the bottom, scraping by on restricted permits and paying triple tariffs, were the younger species. Humanity was very young. Rhett Morgan was wiping down the chrome counter of the Black Sun coffee stall, a small alcove tucked between a high-volume protein dispensary and a shuttered data port. The name was a small, bitter joke. There was no sun here, black or otherwise. Rhett was a man living in parentheses. By trade, he was a mechanic, specializing in older human-made freight engines that the Dominion barely tolerated. By necessity, he was a barista. He'd inherited the stall and the debt, and the low-grade harassment that came with being a human proprietor in a Dominion choke point. He kept his head down, his humor dry, and his grief buried deep. Grief was an engine he knew well. His family had been vaporized in the Nacreon K mining accident 10 years prior. The official report cited seismic instability. The whispers in the dark corridors cited optimized profit margins for the nobility, a convenient way to break a restless workers' union. Rhett served coffee, but he listened to those whispers. His immediate goal was to meet the extortionate rent. His hidden goal was to find the evidence that would burn the noble house responsible to the ground. Business was dead. It was the third bell of the cycle, and the main concourse was empty, save for a few maintenance drones polishing floors that already gleamed. Then, she entered. She did not walk in so much as she materialized in the booth furthest from the light. By human standards, she was jarring. Calling her ugly was a simple, brutal assessment, but it was the one most humans would have made. Her skin was a deep, mottled indigo, like a bruised twilight. Her features were sharp, angular, lacking the soft curves humans were biologically programmed to seek. Her eyes were large, dark, and possessed multiple translucent eyelids that blinked sequentially, giving her gaze a slow, analytical quality. She wore a heavy traveler's cloak, the fabric worn so thin in places that the station's sterile light passed through it. She sat perfectly still, hands clasped on the table. But Rhett, a mechanic trained to spot the smallest dissonance in a humming engine, saw it. She was trembling. A fine, high-frequency vibration that shook her from her shoulders to her knuckles. Rhett looked at his espresso machine. He looked at her. He sighed, the sound lost in the station's ambient hum. He pulled out a filter, a real ceramic one, not the disposable polymers. He cracked 2 actual, impossibly expensive, shell-grown eggs, separating the yolks. He added condensed sweetener and began to whisk, the tiny metal tines the only sound in the stall. He brewed the dark roast, pouring the steaming liquid carefully over the back of a spoon into the golden foam. An earth-old egg coffee, a relic from a time when his grandmother complained about weather, not radiation filters. He carried the heavy mug over. She watched him approach, her multi-lidded eyes unnervingly steady. He set the mug down gently. The rich, sweet smell of custard and burnt bean rose between them. "On the house," Rhett said, his voice a low rumble. "You look like you're running on fumes." She looked at the mug, then at him. Her gaze was heavy, freighted with an exhaustion that went beyond missing sleep. He tried for a smile, but it felt rusty. "It's an old recipe, from my homeworld. Tastes like breakfast, and a series of questionable life choices." A long silence stretched. He was about to retreat, figuring he'd breached some complex alien etiquette, when she spoke. Her voice was a low contralto, devoid of accent, but layered with a profound, aching formality. Questionable choices, Mr. Morgan, are the exclusive luxury of those who still believe they possess options. She did not look at the mug. Most of us are left only with the consequences. Rhett froze. His name was stitched on his work shirt, but the reply was not what he expected. It was precise, it was insightful, and it was bleak. Just Rhett, he corrected automatically. And you are Calith. She finally looked at the mug. You offer this freely. It's a slow day. And, he hesitated. My grandmother used to say you should never let a stranger shiver if you have a warm coat. You have no coat, she observed. I have coffee, Rhett countered. Calith lifted the mug. Her hands were long, with an extra joint in each finger. She raised it in a gesture that looked less like a prelude to drinking and more like a toast, or a sacrifice. She sipped, her eyes closed, all of them, one after another. When they opened, the trembling had lessened by a fraction. The balance, she said, is unexpected. The bitterness anchors the sweet. That's life, I guess, Rhett said, wiping his hands on his apron. No, Calith replied, her gaze distant. That is art. Life is rarely so composed. Before Rhett could unpack that, the universe interrupted. The hiss of the station's main doors opening was followed by the sound he hated most. The rhythmic, synchronized thud of magnetized armor plating on the metal deck. 4 figures in the stark white and silver armor of the Purity Directorate entered the concourse. They moved with the predatory arrogance of those who knew the law was whatever they decided it was this morning. Leading them was Commander Taryn Locke. Her armor was immaculate, her helmet tucked under one arm, revealing a face so severe it looked carved from ice. She stopped 10 paces from Rhett's stall. Proprietor Morgan, she announced. Her voice was clipped, amplified just enough to be obnoxious. Your monthly species diligence stipend is late. Rhett felt the familiar, cold knot tighten in his gut. This was not the usual shakedown. This was Locke herself. This was escalation. Stipend, he said, keeping his voice level. You mean the protection fee? Locke's lip curled. We protect the integrity of the Dominion from the risks younger species introduce. You pay for that privilege. The fee was due at 0 hours. I filed for an extension, Rhett lied. Systems must be lagging. Systems are efficient. Locke took a step closer. Her eyes flicked to Calith in the booth, registering her as other and dismissing her as irrelevant. We find your account lacking. You will pay the standard fee plus the requisite late penalty, in full. Now. Rhett thought of the Nacreon K. He thought of the whispers that said Locke had earned her promotion by signing the accident report. He felt the heat of that methane fire, a ghost on his skin. No, Rhett said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the sterile air, like a lead weight. Locke actually smiled. It was a terrible sight. Define no human. I define it as go audit someone else. I'm paid up. Your system is wrong. A challenge to Directorate authority. Locke raised her hand. The 2 guards behind her unslung their pulse rifles. A costly error, human. We will seize assets equivalent to the debt. You touch that machine, Rhett said, nodding at his espresso maker. And I'll... He stopped. He had nothing. He was a human selling coffee, threatening a fully armed enforcer of the nobility. His hand drifted to his belt. It was an unconscious habit, a nervous tick. His fingers found the thing he'd used as a keychain for 15 years. It was old, heavy bronze, shaped like a stylized shield crossed by a key, a trinket his grandfather, a first-generation spacer, had given him. For opening doors that are stuck, the old man had said. Rhett gripped the Aegis key. He didn't press a button. He didn't utter a command. He just held it and focused all his defiance, all his burning memory of Nacreon, all his simple desire to be left alone, into the metal. He willed it. It happened instantly, and it was devastatingly subtle. No flash of light, no explosion. Commander Terran Locke's datapad, which she had raised to log the asset seizure, suddenly went black. It chimed. A dissonant, three-note error. The screen flashed bright red. Conflict Jurisdictional Mandate, 1A. The text read, Reference, Aegis Concordance. Authority rejected. Locke stared at it. She shook the pad violently. What is this? What trick is this, human? One of her guards muttered. Commander, my targeting telemetry is offline. It's showing. Legal static. Static, Locke barked. It says my warrant signature is insufficient. It's citing a precedence treaty I've never heard of. The air in the stall felt thick, heavy, like the moments before a lightning strike. Rhett kept his hand on the key, which was now vibrating with a faint, almost imperceptible warmth. He felt a strange pressure, as if he were suddenly standing in a court of law, rather than a coffee shop. Locke looked at Rhett. Her cold arrogance was gone, replaced by a flicker of something he had never seen in a directorate officer confusion, and a sliver of raw, superstitious fear. She was a bully, but a bully who operated within a system. That system had just impossibly told her no. This is an anomaly, she declared, her voice losing its edge. A system error. Must be, Rhett agreed, his voice hoarse. Locke looked at him, then at her malfunctioning pad, then at the two guards whose rifles were suddenly inert, their indicator lights flashing amber. This is not concluded. Human, she hissed, forcing the words out. We will report this interference. She turned, her movement stiff, and marched out of the concourse, her squad following in disarray. The heavy doors hissed shut, leaving Rhett alone in the sudden, echoing silence. He let go of the key, his knees weak. He leaned heavily on the counter, his heart hammering against his ribs. What in the seven hells? He looked up. Kalith was watching him. Her expression was unreadable, but the trembling had stopped completely. She rose from the booth, her movements fluid, almost regal. She walked not to the exit, but to his counter. She placed her hands on the bar top, palms down. You have purchased more than coffee, Mr. Rhett, she said, her voice soft. I have no idea what I just did, he whispered. You reminded them, Kalith said, of a promise they made when the stars were young, a promise they have long since decided to forget. She lifted her right hand from the counter, where her fingertips had rested on the ceramic mug. A new pattern had appeared, etched into the glaze as if by acid. It was a crystalline sigil, intricate and cold. She met his gaze. Her multi-lidded eyes held a sorrow so deep he almost looked away. When the darkness comes collecting, she said, repeating her earlier words. But now they felt like a prophecy. Boil the water. She turned and walked away, her worn cloak sweeping the floor. She did not look back. Rhett was left alone with the smell of egg coffee and the impossible crystal mark on the cup. That night, Rhett sat in his cramped apartment above the stall. He stared at his terminal, which was displaying two messages. The first was an anonymous credit transfer. The sum was staggering. 120,000 credits. Enough to pay his debts, the directorate's fees, and his suppliers for 2 years. The second was an official dispatch from the Astergate 12 Port Authority. It was short. Per sub-edict, 77G. The establishment known as Black Sun Coffee is hereby granted a Level 4 security exemption for a period of 30 days. All Purity Directorate compliance inspections are suspended pending review. Rhett stared at the screen, then at the cooling mug with the crystal sigil. The rumors started the next day. The human barista who had faced down Commander Locke. The human shop where directorate warrants failed. His first new customers were a pair of rocky core traders, who usually bought nutrient paste from the dispensary. They ordered 2 black coffees. They sat in Calith's booth and drank in silence. Then came a Kelmore, his pressurized suit hissing, who pointed at the grinder and signaled for a bag of whole beans. Then, a family of oryx, beings of shimmering, crystalline light, who hovered near the counter, fascinated by the steam. The Black Sun coffee stall, once a human footnote in a Dominion station, was becoming something else. It was becoming neutral ground. Rhett Morgan served them all. He served coffee. He fixed a faulty connection on a core data slate. He kept his head down. But as he worked, he could feel new eyes on him. Not the white armor of the directorate. These were quieter. Men and women in nondescript gray fatigues, sitting on benches in the main concourse, pretending to read, but always watching his stall, watching the human who had, somehow, found a key for a door no one else knew was there. The 30-day exemption was a shield, but it was also a spotlight. The Black Sun coffee stall changed. Before, it had been a quiet gray corner. Now, it was a pocket of compressed, vibrant, and often smelly life. The station's ambient noise was still there, but inside Rhett's alcove, it was overridden by the hiss of methane from a Kelmore containment suit, the low, grinding speech of the core traders, and the almost inaudible crystalline chime of the oryx. It became an unspoken rule. An armed core freighter captain, all 4 of his massive rocky arms crossed, would stand in line next to a slender oryx diplomat. A grizzled human mechanic would share a condiment station with a Kelmore whose suit was leaking faint, eye-watering ammonia. The first time a dispute had broken out a misunderstanding over queuing protocol, Rhett had simply tapped the crystalline sigil on Calith's abandoned mug, which he now kept on the back shelf. "We don't do that here," he'd said, his voice flat. "Take it outside." The brawlers, 2 human cargo handlers and a core dock worker, had frozen. They looked at the mug. They looked at the growing audience of aliens. They looked at Rhett, the human who'd apparently made Purity Directorate hardware forget how to work. The fight dissipated. From that day on, the alcove was sacred. "Leave your sidearms at the door," became the operating motto, even though the door was just an open arch. This fragile community began to solidify around a broken piece of tech. "It's the primary frequency converter," a sharp voice said, frustrated. "It's drifting. If it drifts more than 0.5%, we lose the whole cargo bond." Rhett looked up. A human woman was kneeling by the booth Calith had used. A complex data slate splayed open on the table. She had sharp features, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and grease stains on her jumpsuit that were as dark as Rhett's. Next to her, looking profoundly unhappy, was a Quor. He was massive, his skin the color and texture of granite, and he was taking up an entire bench seat. "It's not the converter. Naomi," the Quor grumbled. His voice sounded like gravel being poured into a drum. "It's the power coupling. I told you. Human tech always fails at the coupling." "It's not the coupling," Grint, the woman snapped, not looking up. "The diagnostic would show a power flux. It's not showing a flux. It's showing drift." "Then your diagnostic is broken, too." "My diagnostic is fine." Naomi Park shoved a fistful of hair back from her face, leaving a new streak of black grease on her temple. She was a freelance hyperdrive engineer, one of the few humans allowed to touch Dominion-grade engines, and she was known for being brilliant and perpetually annoyed. Rhett wiped his hands on his apron and walked over. "You're both wrong." Naomi and Grint looked up. Rhett pointed at a tiny, almost invisible component on the slate's schematic. "It's not the converter, and it's not the coupling. It's the buffer. Your signal is clean, but the heuristic buffer is saturated. It's dumping recycled data into the primary command, making your frequency look like it's drifting. Naomi stared at the schematic. She zoomed in. Her eyes widened. I'll be damned. You will be, Grint said. Now we have to buy a new buffer from that thief at Station Supply. No, you don't, Rhett said. He went behind his counter and returned with a small toolkit and a soldering iron. You just need to reseat the primary contact and flush the cache manually. Give me. He looked at it. 10 minutes, and it'll cost you 2 black coffees and one of those rock cakes you quore pretender food. Grint's rocky features almost cracked into a smile. Done. While Rhett worked, his hands moving with the delicate precision of a surgeon, Naomi watched him. I heard the stories, Morgan. Didn't figure you for a buffer jockey. I'm a mechanic, Rhett said, not looking up. This, he gestured to the espresso machine, is just how I pay the rent on my workshop. You're the mechanic who told Locke to go polish her boots. I was more polite than that, Rhett murmured. And I think it was the station's dampeners that did the trick, not me. Sure, Naomi said, skepticism thick in her voice. The dampeners. When he finished, the data slate's error light turned a solid, healthy green. Naomi let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for an hour. Grint clapped Rhett on the shoulder, a gesture that nearly drove him to his knees. The Black Sun, the Quar rumbled. Good coffee, good repairs. You are a useful human. Rhett Morgan. From that day, Naomi Park and Grint became fixtures. Naomi would do her calculations in the corner booth, sipping a latte. Grint would sit by the entrance, a silent, granite guardian, ensuring the weapons at the door policy was respected. A community was forming, one cup at a time. The threat, however, was not sleeping. It appeared on the main concourse vidscreen, silencing the station. The face was handsome, aristocratic, and utterly cold. The uniform was deep indigo, adorned with silver piping that signified the highest echelons of the Aurelian nobility. The caption read, Regent Halvard Drax, addressing the High Council. And these younger species, Drax was saying, his voice smooth and cultured. While useful for labor, bring with them instability, their chaotic emotions, their primitive tribal loyalties, their very biology, are a vector for disruption. The camera panned to show the glittering council chamber. The purity law is not a punishment, Drax continued, his expression one of profound, paternalistic concern. It is a quarantine, a necessary, compassionate measure to protect the integrity of the Dominion. By restricting their movement, their commerce, and their rights of assembly, we ensure the health and safety of all. He means all of us, Naomi muttered, her eyes fixed on the screen. He means put the humans back in their box, Rhett said, wiping a mug with unnecessary force. He means, Grint added, his voice a low growl, that he is about to make a great deal of money seizing unstable assets. The broadcast ended with a sigil of the Dominion. The station felt colder. The new purity law was coming. It was no longer a threat. It was a timetable. 2 days later, she returned. The shop was full. Quar, Kelmore, and humans were crowded around the small tables. Calith appeared in the entrance, just as she had before. She was still wearing the worn cloak, still carrying that impossible weight. The crowd, sensing something, parted for her. She walked to the counter. Rhett felt his breath catch. He had not expected to see her again. Mr. Rhett, she said, her voice the same quiet contralto. Calith, he nodded. The usual. I do not have a usual. You do now. He turned to prepare the egg coffee, his hands moving on autopilot. He was intensely aware of her gaze. He brought the mug to the counter. She did not reach for it. "They watch your stall now," she said. "I've noticed. They're bad at it." He gestured to two men in gray fatigues, pretending to study a shipping schedule across the concourse. "They've been there for 2 days. Haven't turned the page." "They are not the ones you should fear," Caliph said. "It is the ones you cannot see. The ones who sent them." "Regent Drax, you mean?" Her multi-lidded eyes blinked, slowly. "You have been listening. He's hard to miss. He wants to quarantine me and everyone who looks like me. He wants to consolidate power. The law is merely the tool." She finally looked at the mug. "You faced Commander Locke and you did not flee. You built this." She gestured to the crowded shop. "Why?" Rhett leaned on the counter. "It's a living." "It is a target," she corrected. "You invite the attention of wolves. Yet you are not a wolf. You are a mechanic." "A mechanic who makes good coffee." He tried for a joke, but it fell flat. "Look, I don't know what happened that day. I don't know what this key is." He tapped the bronze trinket at his belt. "But I paid my dues. I'm not running." Caliph studied him, her gaze analytical and deeply sad. "Your species is fascinating. You are obsessed with justice. Even when it is clearly absent, you invent it. You build shrines to it." "Better than building shrines to power," Rhett shot back. "Are they different?" she asked. "Is not justice merely the power of the many, directed by a few? What is your justice, Rhett Morgan? That the strong should be punished." He thought of Nacreon. He thought of the fire and the official report. "No, it's not about punishing the strong. It's about protecting the weak." He stopped, surprised at his own words. He hadn't known he believed that until he said it. Caliph tilted her head. "A noble sentiment. But strength protects. Weakness invites aggression." "You're wrong," Rhett said, his voice low. "Strength used to protect is one thing, but real strength, the kind that matters." He looked around his shop, at Naomi and Grint, at the Kelmore sipping a nutrient broth. "The best strength is the kind that forces itself to stand with the weak, the kind that ties its own hands. Otherwise, it's just bullying." Caliph's expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted. A flicker of, not approval, recognition. "A strength that binds itself," she whispered. "That is a dangerous philosophy, human. It has not been spoken aloud in this corridor for a very long time." Their conversation was interrupted. The Purity Directorate was back. It was not Locke. This time, it was a man, an adjutant, flanked by 2 guards. He was carrying a data slate and a smug expression. "Proprietor Morgan," he began, his voice oily. "A new compliance standard, per the Regent's directive." He slid the data slate onto the counter. "A simple pledge of loyalty, a declaration that you renounce any and all associations with seditious or non-compliant elements, and that you fully support the integrity of the purity law." Rhett looked at the screen. It was a dense block of legal text. "You want me to be an informant." "We want you to be a loyal citizen," the adjutant corrected. "Sign the pledge and your exemption." He waved a hand. "Continues. Refuse. And the exemption is revoked. Immediately. And your entire clientele." He said the word, like it was something he'd scraped off his boot. "Will be subject to security sweeps." The shop went silent. Grint rose slowly from his seat. "Rhett," Naomi said, her voice tight. "Don't." The adjutant smirked. "I advise you to listen to your friend. Just press your thumb to the screen. Acknowledge your loyalty." Rhett looked at the slate. He looked at the adjutant. Then he looked at his customers. He was trapped. If he signed, he betrayed them. If he refused, He doomed them. He put his hand to his belt. He gripped the Aegis key. He thought, a strength that binds itself. He reached out his other hand and placed his thumb on the data slate. The adjutant smiled. A victor. Wise choice, human. The screen flashed, pledge accepted. But as Rhett held his thumb there, his other hand gripping the key, he focused. He didn't focus on defiance, as he had with Locke. He focused on the words, I renounce associations. I support the integrity. He felt the key grow warm, not hot. Just a faint, thrumming warmth. He felt that strange, courtroom pressure again. But this time it was different. It felt like an addendum. He pulled his thumb away. The adjutant picked up the slate, his smile fixed. See painless. He turned to leave. Then he stopped. He looked at the slate. His smile faltered. What is this? He muttered. He tapped the screen. Why is the validation stamp flickering? Flickering, Rhett asked, polishing a glass. It will not hold, the adjutant said, his voice rising in confusion. He rebooted the slate. The document was there. Rhett's thumbprint was there. But the official seal of the Purity Directorate was flashing an error code, oath-bind conflict. Your hardware is junk, Rhett said. Maybe you should file for an extension. The adjutant's face went pale. He recognized the words. He looked at Rhett, then at the key on his belt, and the same superstitious fear that had gripped Locke now gripped him. This is faulty, he stammered. I will file a report. This is not over. He practically ran from the stall. Naomi walked up to the counter, her eyes wide. What did you do? I signed the pledge, Rhett said. The pledge is void, Grint rumbled, joining them. The Quor was staring at the bronze key. The words were true, but the intent was bound. The system rejected it. I have no idea what you're talking about, Rhett said, but his voice was shaking. Later that night, long after the last customer had left, Kalith was there. She was sitting in the dark, in the same booth. How did you get in? Rhett asked, locking the front grate. The doors here are for show, she said. The pledge was clever. You bound yourself to the literal words, not their implied meaning. You pledged to support the integrity of the law. You did not pledge to obey it. I just did it, Rhett said. I felt it was the right thing to do. The Aegis responds to intent, she said, as if stating a fact. You have a dangerous tool, Rhett Morgan, and you have dangerous enemies. You mentioned Regent Drax. He's the one behind the law. He is behind more than that. She slid a small, crystalline data chip across the table. You lost your family at Nekrion Key. The words hit him like a physical blow. What do you know about Nekrion? I know what the Dominion reported. A seismic event. It was no seismic event, Rhett snarled. It was murder. Then you should seek proof. She tapped the chip. This is a temporary access key. It will grant you 3 hours inside the Astergate shipping archive. Look for transport manifests. Sub-level cargo. Look for the weeks before, and the days after. The accident. He picked up the chip. Why are you helping me? You gave me coffee, Kalith said. You showed me a strength that binds itself. I am curious to see what it does when it is unbound. He spent those 3 hours in a cramped terminal in the station's sub-basement. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and recycled water. He ran the search. At first, nothing. Just standard ore transport logs. But the access Kalith had given him was deep. Deeper than any public or even commercial-grade clearance. He found the restricted logs. He found the shipping manifest for the week before the disaster. 3 unmarked vessels, logged as sanitation barges, had docked at Nekrion Key. Their cargo high-yield thermal charges, enough to liquidate a moon. He then found the personnel reports, the union leaders, his parents among them, all scheduled for the same shift, in the same sector. Finally, he found the authorization. A single, encrypted order to adjust mining pressures and resolve labor instability. The order had been routed through 3 shell corporations, but the originating encryption key was unmistakable. It was a high-level aristocratic cipher. The order was signed H. Drax. Rhett printed the file. He sat in the dark of his shop, the flimsy printout shaking in his hand. The grief he had buried for 10 years was back, but now it was not grief. It was a white-hot, singular rage. He wanted Halvard Drax dead. Kalith was there when he returned. "You found it," she stated. "He murdered them," Rhett whispered, his voice cracking. "Thousands of them. My family. For labor instability." He sank onto a stool, the rage so potent it made him sick. "I'm going to kill him." Kalith watched him, her gaze unwavering. "You could not. He is protected by armies, fleets." "I don't care. I'll find a way." "And if you did," she said, "you would be executed. Your friends would be implicated. This place," she gestured to the dark stall, "would be ashes. That is not justice. That is just more noise." "I don't care about justice." Rhett slammed his fist on the counter. "I want revenge." "They are not the same thing." She stood up and walked to him. She was taller than him. She looked down at him, and for the first time, he felt the immense, ancient power she kept banked within her. "The men in gray are still watching," she said, her voice soft again. "More will come. They will not bring pledges next time. They will bring weapons. That money I sent you, it is enough to disappear. Take your friends. Go to the outer rim. Live. Let this go." Rhett looked at the printout. He looked at the Aegis key on his belt. He thought of the fire. And then he thought of Grint's gruff loyalty and Naomi's sharp intellect. He thought of the strange, fragile peace he had built in this small corner of the galaxy. He shook his head. "No, this is not a fight you can win, human. You are one man with a coffee pot and a trinket." "Maybe." Rhett stood up, folding the printout and tucking it deep into his pocket. He turned and began cleaning the espresso machine, his hands moving with steady, deliberate motions. "But I make coffee here. If evil wants to visit, let it have a cup first." Kalith watched him, her face a mask of indigo angles. She saw the rage, but she also saw the mechanic, the man who fixed what was broken. She saw the man who had defined strength not as power, but as a bond. "So be it," she whispered. "But boil the water. Rhett Morgan. The darkness is no longer collecting. It is here." The 30-day exemption vanished like steam from a hot mug. Commander Locke did not return. The Purity Directorate did not send enforcers or adjutants. They sent customers. They were human, mostly, dressed in the rough fatigues of fringe-worlders. But they were loud. They complained that the station's recycled air suddenly smelled of Kelmore ammonia. They muttered just loud enough for the Corps to hear. "Why are we letting gravel-heads take seats from tax-paying humans?" Rhett saw the strategy instantly. Locke, bound by the Aegis Key's legal static, could not shut him down from the outside. So, she would burn him down from the inside. A hulking man with a directorate tattoo barely concealed on his neck shoved his way to the counter, bumping a small oryx so hard the crystalline being chimed in alarm. "Just coffee, human," the man sneered. "Black, and tell your rock-pile friend to watch where he's standing." Grint, who was sitting near the entrance, rose slowly. The granite plates on his shoulders shifted. "I am standing where I wish." "Rhett!" Naomi hissed from her corner, her datapad active. That's Corvin, ex-Directorate Crowd Control. He's been on severance for 2 years. What's he doing here? His job, Rhett said under his breath. He stepped between Grint and Corvin. We serve everyone, Corvin, but we don't serve trouble. You get your coffee, and you sit, or you leave. Corvin smiled, a predator's smile. The little human's giving orders. He is the proprietor, a new voice said. Kalith was standing behind Corvin, her indigo skin and angular features seeming to suck the light from the air around her. And you are delaying the cue. Corvin turned, ready to snarl at this new Xeno. But he stopped. He stared at her. He saw an ugly, poorly dressed alien, but his directorate training, buried deep, screamed at him. It recognized something, power, deep, structural, ancient power. He looked at her multi-lidded eyes and felt, for a moment, like a microbe being examined. His bravado cracked. He stammered. I was just ordering. Then order, Kalith said. Corvin paid, took his coffee, and retreated to a table with his friends. They were subdued, their plans disrupted. They are trying to make you a symbol of discord, Kalith said to Rhett later, as he washed mugs. They need proof for Drax's purity law. They need a human to be attacked by a Xeno, or a Xeno to be attacked by a human, inside your stall. They need your neutrality to fail. So, what do we do? Naomi asked, joining them. Grint and I can throw them out. No, Rhett said, drying his hands. He was thinking of Kalith's words, a strength that binds itself. If we fight them, we prove them right. We prove this community is unstable. We have to do the opposite. What's the opposite of a riot? Grint rumbled. Rhett looked at his espresso machine. A party. He called it the Night of Truce. One night, all beverages were free. The announcement was the problem. If he posted it, the Directorate would use it as proof of an illegal assembly and shut him down. I can, Kalith offered. Ensure the invitations are discreet. Rhett did not ask how. The next day, the stall was buzzing. The invitations had bypassed the public net entirely, appearing on secure, encrypted guild channels. The Quar Merchant Collective, the Kelmore Hydro Guild, the Oryx Diplomatic Corps, even the Human Independent Mechanics Union. The message was simple, and bore an anonymous, high-level cipher that screamed, "Do not touch." The Black Sun, neutral ground. One night. All are safe. All are welcome. Leave your politics at the door. We are boiling the water. The stall was transformed. Naomi, in a fit of engineering genius, had jury-rigged a series of localized atmospheric filters over 3 booths, creating pressure-neutral zones for the Kelmore. Grint, now the unofficial head of security, had organized a rotating watch of Quar traders who stood, arms crossed, at the perimeter. Rhett, for his part, was a whirlwind. He'd invented new menu items. The Oryx Shimmer, which was chilled water, refracting light through suspended, edible sucrose crystals. The Kelmore Deep Broth, a pressurized, ammonia-based nutrient soup. The Quar Mineral Roast, coffee so thick it was almost chewable. Kalith watched, analyzing the chemical composition of the broth on a borrowed datapad. This is inefficient. The nutrient uptake is only 40%. It's not about efficiency, Kalith, Rhett said, wiping sweat and coffee grounds from his face. It's about flavor, comfort. Comfort, she repeated, the word foreign. A mitigation of necessary pain. Or just a nice thing, Rhett countered, exhausted. He was stressed, watching Corvin and his thugs, who had taken a table in the back. You should try it sometime. He meant to hand her the datapad with the inventory, but his hand, shaking from fatigue, brushed hers. It was not a spark. It was a shock. He felt the faint, latent cold of her skin, a cold that seemed to sink past his own. She flinched, pulling her hand back as if burned. He froze. "Sorry." "It is unnecessary," she said, her voice strained, almost harsh. "The touching, or the apology?" Rhett tried for a joke, but his voice cracked. "Both." She turned away, suddenly obsessed with the calibration of Naomi's filters. Rhett stood there, his hand tingling. He was terrified of Locke. He was consumed by a cold rage for Drax. But in that small, awkward moment, he realized he was just as terrified of this strange, ugly alien woman leaving. He did not know her, but he knew her absence would leave a hole he couldn't name. She turned back, sensing his shift. Her multi-lidded eyes were, for a second, unguarded, soft. "Do not be afraid, Rhett Morgan," she said, her voice low. "You are brewing comfort. It is a worthy act." She was afraid, too. She was an empress suffocating under the weight of her crown, disgusted by the sycophants who surrounded her. This human, this mechanic who spoke of tying strength's hands, was the first person in a century who had made her feel seen, and she was terrified of losing him to the violence she knew was bearing down on them. The night of truce was a success. It was loud. It was crowded. It was a chaotic, beautiful mess. Kelmore hissed companionably at Oryx. Humans and Quor argued over engine specs. Even Corvin's thugs were quiet, outnumbered 100-1 by people determined to have a peaceful night. Rhett was refilling the grinder, a real, genuine smile on his face. He felt a moment of pure, unburdened peace. It was in that precise moment that the bomb detonated. It was not inside. It was outside, in the service corridor just beyond the alcove. The blast was concussive, designed to shatter and maim. The shockwave blew the entire front of the stall inward. Metal supports, tables, and customers were thrown across the space. Fire suppression foam immediately began to spray from the ceiling. Alarms blared, through the ringing in his ears. Rhett heard a new sound. "It's the Xenos, they blew it." Corvin and his men were on their feet. They had drawn pulse pistols. This was it, the false flag. They used the explosion as cover, aiming their weapons at the stunned Grint. Directorate were under attack. Rhett saw it happen in slow motion. Corvin's partner, seeing Rhett struggling to his feet by the counter, turned his weapon. He wasn't aiming to wound. A blur of motion. A human man in a simple spacer's jacket, who had been nursing a single coffee in the corner for 3 hours, moved. He was impossibly fast. He shoved Rhett hard, shielding him with his own body, just as the pulse bolt struck. The man collapsed, a smoking, cauterized hole in his back. Chaos erupted. Grint roared, not in pain, but in fury, and backhanded Corvin, sending the man flying into a bulkhead. The other Quor formed a wall, protecting the civilians. Naomi, screaming in rage, activated the emergency fire suppression. The stall was instantly filled with thick, suffocating foam, blinding everyone. Rhett scrambled to the side of the man who had saved him. Blood was already pooling on the floor. "Why?" Rhett yelled over the alarm. "I don't even know you," the man coughed, a spray of red. "Captain, Thresh Orlan," he gasped. "Orders. Protect the asset." "Orders from who?" Rhett demanded, trying to put pressure on the wound. But his hands passed through the smoking cavity. "Her Majesty." Thresh's eyes rolled back. He was gone. Rhett stared at the dead man, the words, "Her Majesty," echoing in his head. He looked around wildly for Kalith. She had been standing right by the booth. She was gone, vanished in the smoke and foam. Station security slammed into the concourse, their heavy boots thudding. Behind them, in a fresh, immaculate uniform, was Commander Taryn Locke. Her face was a perfect mask of tragic, official concern. A terrible, predictable tragedy, she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. This illegal, multi-species gathering has resulted in extremist violence, just as Regent Drax predicted. This area is now under Purity Directorate martial law. Her men moved to arrest Grint, who was still standing over the unconscious form of Corvin. No. The word was quiet, but it was amplified by the stall's wrecked acoustics. Rhett Morgan stood up. He was covered in Thresh Orlan's blood and fire suppression foam. He climbed onto his overturned espresso machine, the metal still hot. "He's lying," Rhett said, his voice raw. The civilians, aliens and humans huddled together, turned to him. Their datapads, by sheer instinct, began to record. "This wasn't extremist violence," Rhett yelled, pointing at Locke. "This was an assassination. That man," he pointed to Corvin, "is Directorate muscle. That man," he pointed to the dead Thresh Orlan, "died protecting me. This was a Dominion attack, a false flag to justify their purity law." Locke's face went rigid. "Proprietor, you are in shock. You are making treasonous accusations." "Am I?" Rhett's gaze was burning, fueled by the Nacreon fire. "They want us to hate. They want us to believe we are unstable. They want us to believe we need purity to be safe." He spread his arms, encompassing the wrecked shop, the bleeding aliens, the terrified humans. "But this man died for me. This Quor," he gestured to Grint, "is defending us. This engineer," he nodded to Naomi, "is risking her life to be here. We are not unstable. We are a community." He jabbed a bloody finger at Locke. "And we are done being your excuse." "From this moment," Rhett declared, "the Black Sun coffee stall is not a business. It is neutral ground. It is a sanctuary under the Aegis Concord. All species are welcome. All violence is forbidden. If the Purity Directorate wants to violate that, they will have to do it right here, in front of the entire galaxy. Boil your water, Commander, or get the hell out of my shop." The crowd was silent. A human, the weakest link, had just drawn a line in the sand against the entire Dominion. Locke was trapped. She could not arrest him. Not now. Not while he was a martyr, bleeding on his own counter, with dozens of datapads streaming the Black Sun manifesto across the sector. She gave a curt nod. "Secure the evidence. We will investigate." She retreated. For the second time, she had been defeated by the human mechanic. The following days were a blur. The stall was a wreck, but the community Rhett had spoken of materialized. Grint and his Quor brought new alloy plates to replace the walls. Naomi, cursing like a sailor, rewired the entire power grid. Other humans, aliens, and even a few sympathetic station workers dropped off supplies, credits, and words of support. Rhett worked in a haunted silence. He had failed Thresh Orlan. Protect the asset. Her Majesty. He could only think of one person who could have given that order. Kalith. And she was gone. Naomi, meanwhile, was digging. She had salvaged the security footage and, more importantly, the detonation signal. "Rhett," she said, 2 days after the attack. Her face was pale. "The bomb. It wasn't just military grade. It was Purity Directorate issue. Top of the line." "We knew that," Rhett said, hammering a bent support. "No. You don't know," she insisted, pulling him to her terminal. "I tracked the detonation signal. It was remote, bounced off 3 encrypted relays. But the origin, it wasn't on the station." She brought up a file. "A trace route. The trigger signal originated from a secure, high-nobility server, registered to the Echelon Prime." The Echelon Prime. A luxury flagship, a mobile palace. It's where the high-caste nobility play games, make deals. It's hosting the Hades Fair in 3 days, a massive political gala. And guess who the host is? She typed a command. The face of Regent Halvar Drax filled the screen. Rhett felt the blood drain from his face. He ordered the attack on his own station. He killed Thresh. He almost killed all of us. To prove his purity law is necessary, Naomi finished. A false flag. He creates the instability, then sells the cure. As the weight of this settled, a formal, high-caste messenger drone floated into the wrecked stall. It hovered silently, its silver chassis gleaming. It stopped 3 feet from Rhett. It projected a flickering, stylized invitation. The script was archaic, embossed with the sigil of House Drax. To the Honorable Proprietor of the Black Sun, in recognition of your unique influence on interspecies affairs, Regent Halvar Drax cordially invites you to the Hades Fair aboard the Echelon Prime. All debts will be discussed. All accounts will be settled. It was not an invitation. It was a summons. It was a trap. It was Drax, the architect of his family's murder, dangling the bait. "I'm going," Rhett said. "Rhett, that is insane," Naomi yelled. "You'll be walking into his fortress. He just tried to bomb you. He murdered my family. He just tried to murder my friends. He invited me to settle accounts." Rhett's eyes were cold. "I'm accepting his offer." He spent the next day preparing. He was not a soldier. He was a mechanic. He did not polish a blaster. He sharpened a 20-inch titanium pry bar to a razor's edge. He calibrated a high-voltage industrial welder, shortening the arc to a precise, lethal point. He was packing these tools when a small, unmarked courier drone zipped into the stall. It dropped a small, flat box at his feet and was gone before he could react. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a disc of polished silver. It was heavy and cold to the touch. It was engraved with the same intricate, crystalline sigil that was on his coffee mug. A note, on simple, heavy cardstock, was tucked beneath it. The script was Calith's. "Open this only when you are forced to choose between the path of hatred and the path of hope." He clutched the seal. "Where is she? Is she safe? Did she send Thresh to die for me?" He pocketed the disc. It felt heavy as an anchor. The night before the gala, Naomi found him in the dark, rebuilt shop. He was staring at the printout of the Necreon K order, the one Drax had signed. "You're not planning to come back, are you?" she said. It was not a question. Rhett looked at the name on the paper. H. Drax. I want to look him in the eye. Naomi, I want him to know who I am. I want him to know whose son I am." "And then what?" she asked, her voice small. "You'll use the key?" Rhett's voice was thick, choked with a decade of grief and a week of fresh rage. "I don't know. That's what scares me. I've spent 10 years dreaming of justice. But now, holding this, justice isn't enough." He looked at his hands, stained with grease and Thresh's old blood. "I'm scared that if I get close enough, I won't use the Aegis key. I won't use the law." He touched the sharpened pry bar hidden in his jacket. "I'll just use this, and I'll be exactly the monster he says we are." The Echelon Prime was not a starship. It was a scar of light, a sovereign city-state dedicated to obscene luxury. It drifted through the heliotrope corridor, immune to the tariffs and desperation of stations like Astergate 12. Rhett Morgan moved through its grand concourse, feeling less like a guest and more like a microbe. He wore his only suit, a gray, functional garment he'd last worn at his parents' memorial. It was clean, but compared to the beings around him, it was sackcloth. Aristocrats from a dozen elder species drifted past, draped in fabrics that seemed woven from light and shadow, their laughter like breaking crystal. The air smelled of ozone, exotic pollens, and a thick, buttery scent of old money. He had been stripped of his pry bar and welder at the security checkpoint, but the Aegis key on his belt had registered as heritage jewelry, and the silver disc from Calith felt cold and heavy in his pocket. "Proprietor Morgan," a synthesized voice chimed from a floating drone. "Your presence is requested in the Grand Atrium. Regent Drax is about to begin his address." He was being herded. He followed the drone, his stomach a cold knot of acid. He scanned the crowds, the gantries, the service alcoves. He found her. Naomi Park, wearing the gray overalls of a ship's technician, was calibrating a data conduit on a mezzanine level. She met his eyes for a fraction of a second, gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod, and went back to her work. She was in. He was not alone. The Grand Atrium was a sphere of impossible size. A captive, miniature star pulsed in its center, casting golden light over thousands of floating platforms. On the central dais stood Regent Halvor Drax, flanked by a phalanx of Purity Directorate guards. At his right hand, severe and immaculate in her white armor, was Commander Taryn Locke. Drax approached the podium. The atrium fell silent. "My friends," Drax began, his voice warm, resonant, and utterly false. "We are gathered tonight at a precipice. The Dominion is strong, but strength invites complications." He smiled, a gesture of shared burden. "For generations, we have extended our protection, our infrastructure, our stabilizing presence to the younger species. We have acted as benevolent stewards. But that benevolence," his voice, hardened just a fraction, "has been mistaken for weakness." A murmur of assent rippled through the nobles. From the chaotic markets of the Outer Rim to the core world refineries, instability spreads. These younger races, in their passionate, primitive state, bring conflict. They bring biological hazards. They threaten the very purity that defines our society. We have debated. We have discussed. Tonight, we act. Commander Locke stepped forward, projecting a holographic scroll. "The Purity Edict," Drax announced, his voice ringing with triumph. "A simple, necessary measure. It restricts non-sanctioned species from vital sectors. It enforces mandatory biological screening. It authorizes the Purity Directorate to detain, indefinitely, any younger species deemed a threat to social harmony." It was Nacreon K. Made legal. It was a blank check for genocide. "It is not oppression," Drax said softly. "It is salvation. An act of compassionate, necessary quarantine." He was met with thunderous, polite applause. "And now," Drax said, raising a hand, "we have a perfect, timely example of this very threat." A spotlight, harsh and white, snapped on. It cut through the golden haze and found Rhett Morgan, standing alone on his small platform. The atrium's thousands of eyes turned to him. "This human," Drax announced, "is Rhett Morgan, proprietor of a small stall on Astergate 12. A stall that has become a center for criminal assembly, interspecies conflict, and illegal technology." Rhett's blood ran cold. "Just 4 nights ago," Drax's voice dripped with manufactured sorrow, "an extremist attack at this human's establishment, an illegal gathering he himself organized, resulted in the death of a Dominion officer. An attack, I might add, that our intelligence suggests was funded by rival xenospecies." The lie was so perfect, so complete. It took Rhett's breath away. Drax had bombed his shop and was now blaming him for it. "He represents the chaos," Drax said, his voice rising. "The defiance, the impurity. Proprietor Rhett Morgan, I invite you to the dais. A gesture of reconciliation is required. A public example to settle all accounts." Guards materialized, their polished boots silent. They gestured for Rhett to move. He was trapped. Every eye was on him. This was the trap. This was the settling of accounts. He was to be the galaxy's scapegoat. He walked. He left his platform and moved toward the central dais. He could feel the cold weight of the pry bar that was no longer there. He could feel the rage, the pure, white-hot urge to leap across the space and tear Drax's throat out. He thought of his parents, choking on methane. If I kill him, it's over. His hand went to his belt, not to a weapon, to the Aegis key. He stepped onto the dais. He was 10 feet from the man who had destroyed his life. He could smell Drax's cologne. Proprietor Morgan, Drax smiled. You have caused a great deal of trouble, but we are merciful. You will sign this confession, acknowledging your role in the Astergate instability, and pledge your loyalty to the Echelon Security Force. You will become a loyal citizen. A data slate was presented. It was the loyalty pledge, but this one had no loopholes. Rhett looked at the slate. He looked at Drax. He looked at Locke, whose hand was resting on the butt of her sidearm. You're wrong, Rhett said. His voice was hoarse, but it carried in the perfect quiet. Drax's smile wavered. I beg your pardon. You're wrong about the attack. You know exactly who bombed my stall. You know who killed that officer? Drax laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. Are you mad, human, or just suicidal? You are accusing me. I am, Rhett said. He took a breath. He was a mechanic. He fixed broken things. This was the most broken thing he had ever seen. But I didn't come here to trade accusations. I came to see if you believed your own words. My words. You said you want to protect the innocent. You said this edict is compassionate. You said you want to ensure safety. Rhett's hand closed around the Aegis key. So prove it. He gripped the key and willed it. It did not explode. It did not hum. It simply was. The air in the grand atrium changed. It became heavy, thick, and ancient. The golden light of the miniature star seemed to dim, as if filtered through old glass. The polite chatter died. Every being in the room, from the highest aristocrat to the lowest server, felt a sudden, crushing weight of legal and spiritual gravity. The Aegis Conquered had been invoked. The courtroom that predated the Dominion was now in session. Drax felt it. His face paled, his arrogance replaced by a flicker of the same superstitious confusion Rhett had seen on Locke. What? What is this? This, Rhett said, his voice ringing with a power that was not his own. Is an old law, a law you've forgotten. It says that words have weight, regent, and that oaths, spoken in public, are binding. Rhett pointed at Drax. You want to pass your edict, fine, but swear to it. Swear to this assembly, on your honor and your title, that you will protect the innocent in all your actions. Swear that your purity law will never be used to harm an innocent being. It was a brilliant trap. If Drax refused, he proved himself a liar, his compassionate law a sham. If he agreed, the Aegis would bind him. Drax saw the trap. He sneered, trying to reclaim his power. You think a human's parlor trick, this pressure, means anything? I am a regent of the Dominion. I always protect the innocent. He had said it. The Aegis key in Rhett's hand flashed once. A pulse of cold, bronze light. The air snapped. Drax stumbled. He raised his hand to gesture to his guards, and his arm stopped, frozen in midair. He tried to speak the order. Arrest him! But the words came out as a choked gasp. The Aegis had locked. It had heard his oath. I always protect the innocent, and it was now enforcing it. He could not order an action that he knew would harm an innocent. He was, in an instant, paralyzed by his own hypocrisy. The atrium exploded in gasps. Nullweave, Drax choked out, forcing the words. Locke now. Commander Terran Locke, ever the loyal enforcer, did not hesitate. She saw the Aegis not as law, but as chaos. She shoved her hand into a pouch on her armor and retrieved a black, metallic device. A null weave, forbidden technology, designed to disrupt and destroy ancient oath fields. She aimed it at Rhett. "You are in violation of—" Rhett reacted. He did not know how. He just felt the device's intent. It was an intent to break the law. He raised his hand, the one holding the key. He felt the Aegis connection, but he pushed past it. He reached out with his mind, not to Drax, but to the device in Locke's hand. He did not know the words. He was the words. He was the mnemonic binder. He demanded the device's truth. Hard oath. Locke pressed the trigger. The device did not fire. Instead, it shrieked. A high-pitched electronic wail. A bright red data log projected from its lens, splashing across the dais for all to see. Null weave device. Model 7. Status active. Targeting Aegis Concordance. Intense subversion of Category 1 legal oath. The nobles recoiled. This was not just a human's trick. This was high treason. Locke, the enforcer of the law, was caught red-handed attempting to shatter the most ancient law of all, using a piece of technology illegal in a dozen systems. Locke stared at the device, horrified. It's malfunctioning." Drax, seeing his plot unravel, roared in fury. He was still fighting against the Aegis lock, but he managed to force one single command to his personal, non-Aegis-bound guards. "Kill him. Kill them all." The Purity Directorate guards, loyal to Drax's person, not the Dominion's law, raised their pulse rifles. The crowd screamed. A massacre was about to begin. A shadow moved on the mezzanine level. It was Kaelith. She was standing at the railing, her worn cloak gone, revealing a simple, dark traveling suit. She was staring down at the dais, and her multi-lidded eyes were no longer sad. They were blazing. They were chiseled with intricate, glowing symbols of pure, golden power. She did not shout. She did not speak. She simply issued a command. It was silent, but it struck the minds of Drax's guards like a physical hammer. "Stand down." The command was not a request. It was a root-level override. It was an authority so total, so supreme, that their bodies obeyed before their minds could even process the order. Every single guard froze, their rifles lowered. They stared into the crowd, their expressions suddenly blank, their loyalty to Drax severed like a thread. In the confusion, Kaelith turned and melted back into a service corridor. She was gone. On the dais, there was a terrible silence. Drax was shaking, not with rage, but with terror. He knew that command. He had only heard it once before, from the throne world itself. He was trapped. The Aegis held his body. The crowd had seen his treason. His guards were inert. Rhett was swaying. The power that had flowed through him, the invocation of the conquered, the binding of the null weave device, had taken everything. His vision was tunneling. Drax had to salvage this. He was a politician before he was a tyrant. An error, he stammered, his body still rigid from the Aegis lock. Clearly, a security error. This edict, it requires review. He was fighting to speak. Humanitarian review. To ensure the protections for the innocent are adequate. He looked at Rhett, his eyes filled with a murderous promise. All enforcement is suspended for 3 days. He had bought himself time. 3 days to undo this. 3 days to find the human and kill him. The weight of the Aegis Concord receded, the air thinning. The immediate pressure was gone, but the oath remained. Drax could move again, though his motions were stiff. Rhett collapsed. The adrenaline, the rage, the impossible power. All vanished, leaving him an empty husk. He hit the floor of the dais, his suit soaked in sweat. Rhett, Naomi was there. She had broken cover, running from the mezzanine. She skidded to his side, throwing her body between him and the stunned guards. "I got you, mechanic," she whispered, hauling his arm over her shoulder. "I got you." Rhett, his vision fading to black, looked at the retreating, staggered form of Regent Halvor Drax. He saw the man, vulnerable, exposed, and humiliated. He still had the silver disc in his pocket. He still had the memory of the Nacreon fire in his soul. If I had the pry bar now, a cold, dark part of his mind whispered, it would all be over. Just one strike. He passed out, his hatred and his hope at war. The escape from the Echelon Prime was a blur of adrenaline and recycled air. Naomi's technician credentials were their only passport, getting them through 2 checkpoints on the pretense that Rhett was a biohazard contaminant from the explosion, needing immediate quarantine. They didn't run. They walked, a brisk, terrified, official walk, down freight elevators and through humming service corridors. Behind them, they could hear the lockdown alarms finally beginning to wail as Drax's personal guard realized their true targets had vanished. "Grint," Naomi whispered into her comm. "Docking Bay 94. Bring the heat, now." They burst through the final pressure door. Bay 94 was supposed to hold luxury shuttles. Instead, it was occupied by a battered, ugly, asymmetrical freighter with core markings. Its cargo bay door was open, its engines already whining with pre-launch energy. "The Rusty Mug," Rhett gasped, recognizing Grint's personal ship. "How did you get this cleared?" "The Quor Merchant Guild," Grint's voice boomed from the cockpit. "Has many friends, and many flexible shipping manifests. Get in." They dove into the cargo bay, Naomi hitting the seal. The Rusty Mug blasted out of the Echelon Prime, its acceleration pinning them against the bulkhead. They were fugitives. Drax did not retreat to a luxury estate. He fled to his fortress. Port Vale was not a station. It was a weapon. A jagged asteroid hollowed out and bristling with defense platforms. It was Drax's personal vault, his command center, and his sanctuary. He was safe there. He had 3 days. Commander Terran Locke was given a simple, direct order. Find the human Rhett Morgan and the engineer Naomi Park. Find the Aegis key. Erase the witnesses. Erase the problem. Locke, her belief in order, shaken by the Nullweave's public failure, accepted the mission. She was a soldier. The Regent gave an order. She obeyed. The chaos on the Echelon Prime was the human's fault. Order must be restored. Rhett, Naomi, and Grint huddled in the cramped, dark workshop above the black sun. The station was crawling with Directorate patrols. "We are trapped," Naomi said, running frantic diagnostics. "Port Vale is locked down. No one gets in or out. Drax is sitting on his private server, erasing every trace of Nacreon. By the time his 3 days are up, he'll have a new, fabricated set of evidence." "We have the oath," Rhett said, his voice raw. He was exhausted, but the rage was a fuel. "The Aegis bound him." "It bound him to protect the innocent," Naomi countered. "He'll just redefine innocent. He's a politician. Words are his weapons. We need proof. We need the original, uncorrupted Nacreon order. The one you saw. It's on his server, at Port Vale." Grint, who had been cleaning a massive energy projector, spoke. "Port Vale has one weakness." Rhett and Naomi looked at him. "The Regent is an aristocrat," Grint rumbled. "He must have his comforts. Even in his fortress, he requires taste." Rhett's eyes widened. "No," Grint nodded, his rocky features unreadable. "He imports his coffee. Whole bean. From a private estate on Olympus Mons. 1 shipment, every 5 days. The next one is due tomorrow at 0400. "The Hot Cup Alliance," Rhett muttered, a grim, humorless smile touching his lips. It's insane. It's human, Naomi said, her fingers already flying across her terminal, pulling up shipping manifests. It's insane. It's stupid. And it relies on the enemy's arrogance. It's perfect. Grint, can you get us a container? I am the container, Grint replied. The plan was desperate. A long shot stitched together with human ingenuity. Grint, using the Quar Guild's seemingly limitless supply of forged documents, re-registered the rusty mug as a luxury food transport. Naomi, a genius of signal mimicry, cloned the transponder codes of the actual coffee freighter. They loaded the main cargo bay with 2 massive, pressurized tanks of Black Sun coffee beans. It was Rhett's entire stock. If this doesn't work, Rhett said, sealing the hatch. I'm out of business. If this doesn't work, Naomi replied, checking her plasma cutter. We're cosmic dust. They approached Port Vale in the dead of the next cycle. The fortress loomed, a mountain of black rock and glittering energy signatures. Vessel Aurelian Roast, a cold, synthesized voice hailed them. You are approaching a restricted military zone. State your business. Quar Merchant Guild, delivery for Regent Drax. Grint growled into the comm, his voice pitched to maximum annoyance. Per schedule, we are carrying perishable goods. Do not make my coolant fail. The data core was a cathedral of light. A pulsing, holographic matrix surrounded a central crystal spire. Get to work, Rhett said. I'll watch the door. I'm in, Naomi murmured, jacking her terminal into the main console. Firewalls are thick, but I'm looking at the Nacreon file. It's here. It's just locked, encrypted, Drax's personal key. Then break it. I'm trying. This is alien, older than the... A voice, cold and sharp, cut through the room. You are not authorized to be here. Engineer Park. Rhett spun. Commander Taryn Locke was standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 Purity enforcers. Her armor was immaculate. She had not come from the corridor, a hidden lift. She had been waiting. It was a logical deduction, Locke stated, her voice calm. The Regent is vulnerable. His only true vulnerability is his past. You came for the Nacreon file. I was ordered to secure it. Secure it, or erase it, Rhett said, stepping in front of Naomi. It makes no difference. Order must be preserved. The Regent's authority is absolute. Surrender the Aegis Key, human. You saw the Echelon Prime, Rhett said, his hand moving to his belt. You saw the Nullweave. You saw treason. Is that the order you follow? I saw chaos, Locke corrected, her face rigid. I saw a human using a forbidden artifact to disrupt the chain of command. You are the instability, Morgan. You are the impurity. She raised her pulse rifle. Last chance. Rhett gripped the key. He knew he couldn't fight her. Not with weapons. Commander Locke, Rhett said, his voice dropping into the Aegis resonance. The air in the data core grew thick, the light from the matrix dimming. Do you believe in order? I am its instrument, she snapped, but her finger wavered on the trigger. She felt the pressure. Then swear it, Rhett challenged. Swear, by the conquered you serve, that you have never seen Regent Drax give an order that violated Dominion law. Swear that you have no knowledge of the Nacreon accident. Locke's face went pale. She was trapped by her own dogma. She could not lie under the Aegis. I am a soldier, she stammered. I obey. Swear it, Rhett commanded. I cannot, she gasped. The Aegis field was crushing her. To lie would be spiritual annihilation. Because you know, Rhett yelled. You signed the report. You were there. I was not, she screamed. I signed what I was given. I suspected. But I did not. No. Got it, Naomi yelled. The encryption broke. The central holographic spire flashed. The Nacreon file opened. It was not a data log. It was a live recording. A secure holocall. A younger, but no less ruthless. Halvar Drax, speaking to the Nacreon K-Mine administrator. The union is unacceptable. Drax's voice echoed in the chamber. The cost of compliance is too high. I want this problem resolved. You will proceed with the pressure adjustment, as scheduled. The loss of life is regrettable, but acceptable. It will serve as a powerful lesson in obedience. The video feed was followed by the data, the logs, the casualty lists, thousands of names. Among them, Alara and Marcus Morgan. Locke stared at the hologram, her rifle lowering. She was not looking at a politician. She was looking at a mass murderer. The order she had built her entire life upon was a lie. He called it acceptable, she whispered. Rhett, however, was not looking at the screen. He was looking at the door behind Locke. Regent Halvar Drax stood there, his face purple with rage, holding a high-capacity pulse pistol. Treason, Drax screamed, but he wasn't looking at Locke. He was looking at Rhett. You human maggot, you have destroyed everything. He raised his pistol. Time stopped. Rhett felt the cold rage, the printout, the years of grief. It all focused into a single, burning point. His hand went to his pocket, not for the key, but for the cold, silver disc. He opened it. There was no sound. There was only a message, burned into his mind. Calith's voice. If you kill him, the law is broken. The Aegis will shatter. The truth will be lost in an act of vengeance. Choose justice, human. Not the knife. Rhett looked at Drax. He looked at the pistol. He had the sharpened pry bar he had smuggled in his boot. He could be on Drax in a second. He could end it. He could have his revenge. He felt the Nacreon fire burn his throat. He saw his mother's face. He let his hand fall from his boot. He turned to the data core. He placed his hand, the one wearing the key, on the central spire. He was not a killer. He was a binder. Aegis conquered, he roared. I invoke the right of public truth. The blood of Nacreon demands to be heard. The key flared. The data core shrieked. It was not built to interface with this power. But the Aegis did not ask. It ripped the Nacreon file from the server. It bypassed every Dominion firewall, every security protocol. It broadcast, across the heliotrope corridor, on every station, every ship, every public terminal. The face of Halvar Drax appeared. His voice echoed. The loss of life is acceptable. The names of the dead scrolled across the screens. Thousands of them. Humans. Quor. Kelmore. The whispers that Rhett had listened to for a decade became a galaxy-wide scream of fury. The accident was murder. In the data core, Drax was screaming in pure, animalistic terror. He had lost, but he was not done. If I am ruined, he shrieked, his face a mask of madness. This entire sector burns with me. He slammed his hand onto a red panel on the wall. Fortress, self-destruct authorization. Drax Omega, 5 minutes. Alarms blared. Self-destruct initiated. Core overload imminent. Naomi lunged for the console. I can't stop it, it's a hardline command. Drax laughed, a broken, sobbing sound. Then, Terran Locke, the woman of ice, the woman of order, made her choice. Her world was a lie. Her order was a crime. But justice was still real. She raised her pulse rifle. She did not aim at Rhett. She aimed at Halvar Drax. Regent Drax, she said, her voice shaking but clear. By the authority of the true Aegis conquered, you are under arrest for mass murder and high treason. You bitch, Drax snarled, raising his own pistol. I confess, Locke continued, ignoring him, to aiding and abetting these crimes through willful ignorance. I will stand trial. But you will face justice. Before either could fire, a new voice filled the room. It was Calith's. But it was not the soft contralto of the shop. It was a voice of absolute galactic power, coming from every speaker at once. Command override. Code Aurelian Omega 0. Stand down all systems. Self-destruct sequence cancelled. The alarms stopped. The red lights died. Drax froze, his face ashen. He knew that authorization. It was a code that did not exist. It was a code reserved for... The vault door opened. Calith stood there, her worn cloak gone. She was just... Calith. But the power radiating from her pushed them all back a step. The show is over, Halvar, she said. Drax, trapped, turned his pistol on her. Whoever you are, you die with... He never finished. The Aegis key on Rhett's belt flared. Drax's oath. I always protect the innocent collided with his intent to murder Calith. The legal backlash was catastrophic. Drax screamed as the Aegis field clamped down, his limbs contorting. He was not paralyzed. He was bound, held immobile by the phantom chains of his own broken promise. Rhett Morgan walked past the frozen, horrified Locke. He walked past the trembling Naomi. He stood directly in front of the man who had murdered his family. He was close enough to touch him. The rage was still there, the fire. But Calith's words were there, too. He reached up and gently took the pistol from Drax's rigid, unfeeling hand. I am not going to kill you, Halvar, Rhett whispered, his voice shaking with the effort. I want you to live. I want you to live long enough to stand trial. I want you to sit in a courtroom, bound by the law you tried to burn, and listen as they read every single name you called acceptable. The galaxy did not change overnight, but in the heliotrope corridor, the tectonic plates of power had shifted, and the epicenter was a coffee shop. The capture of Regent Halvar Drax at Port Vale, broadcast live to 1 billion terminals, had shattered the Purity Directorate's authority. The revelation of the Nacreon massacre, confirmed by the Regent's own voice, sent a wave of cold fury through the younger species and a ripple of profound shame through the old. Calith's override command had placed Port Vale in total lockdown, its systems frozen, its automated defenses inert. She, Rhett, Naomi, and the catatonic broken. Terran Locke were met not by Dominion soldiers, but by a detachment of beings Rhett had never seen. They wore armor of burnished, antique bronze, and carried no visible weapons. They moved in absolute silence. They were the Aegis Honor Guard, a peacekeeping force unseen in the corridor for 500 years, summoned by a code Rhett could not comprehend. Drax, still bound by the Aegis oath, was taken into their custody. He did not speak. He merely watched Rhett, his eyes screaming the murder he could no longer command. Locke, in contrast, was utterly lucid. As the honor guard approached her, she unfastened her command armor, letting the heavy white pauldrons clatter to the deck. She stood in her simple black undersuit, exposed and unadorned. I am Commander Terran Locke, she stated, her voice hollow. I surrender myself to the judgment of the Aegis conquered. I confess to the suppression of evidence, willful ignorance in the face of mass murder, and aiding the facilitation of a false flag operation. I will testify. I will provide my complete logs. She looked at Rhett, her eyes, for the first time, human. That is the order I follow now. Rhett, Naomi, and Grint, who had been anxiously waiting in the loading bay, were escorted back to Astergate 12 as heroes. But Rhett felt no triumph. He just felt the heavy, cold weight of the pry bar in his boot, the one he had chosen not to use. For the first time in a millennium, The Interspecies Tribunal of the Aegis Conquered was formally convened. It was not held in a glittering Dominion court. By request of the Nacreon Survivors Collective, it was held in a cleared-out cargo bay on Astergate 12. The bay was consecrated by the Aegis Honor Guard. The bronze key's sigil, projected in hard light above the hastily assembled judges' platform. Beings from every species in the corridor attended. The families of the dead, human, and Quor sat in the front rows. Rhett, Naomi, and Grint sat with them. The trial was short. The evidence was absolute. Drax, bound by the oath, was physically incapable of lying when questioned by the Aegis arbiters. He could not deny the recording. He could not deny the signatures. He could only state, his voice dripping with venom, that his actions were necessary for the stability of the Dominion. Taryn Locke was the final witness. She walked to the platform, not as a commander, but as a penitent. She recited, fact by fact, every order she had followed, every report she had falsified, every doubt she had buried in the name of order. She did not ask for mercy. She only asked that her testimony be entered into the Conquered's permanent record. The verdict was read by a high arbiter, a towering, crystalline oryx. Halvar Drax, of House Drax, you are found guilty of high treason against the Aegis Conquered, mass murder, and the subversion of Dominion law. You spoke an oath to protect the innocent. This Concord, therefore, binds you to that oath. The sentence was not death. It was justice, cold and precise. You are sentenced to biostasis, fully conscious. You will be held at the Nacreon Memorial until your house, and its holdings, have paid full restitution to every family affected by your actions. Your assets, your titles, your ships, are forfeit to this debt. You will live to see it paid, however many generations it may take. A low gasp went through the crowd. It was a living death. As Drax was led away by the honor guard, he stopped. He looked past the judges, past the families, and fixed his gaze on Rhett. You human fool, he spat, his voice a harsh whisper. You think this is victory. You think I was the architect. I am just a regent. You have not stopped the storm. You have only made yourself the lightning rod. The words hung in the air as he was taken away. A new, cold unease settled over the victory. There was someone above Drax. The Black Sun coffee stall reopened 1 week later. It was not the same. Grint and his Quor compatriots had rebuilt it, not with scavenged plating, but with polished, reinforced alloy. Naomi had installed a new, independent data hub, shielded from the station's main grid. It was no longer a stall. It was an embassy. It was crowded. But the atmosphere was different. In one booth, Quor merchants and human freighter captains were hammering out a new shipping treaty, mediated by Naomi. In another, a group of Kelmore and Oryx were debating territorial water rights. Rhett stood behind his new, gleaming chrome espresso machine, making coffee. He had hung a new sign next to the menu. It was hand-carved, a gift from Grint. It read, "Before you argue, order 2 cups." The drink first, talk later protocol became a quiet phenomenon. The idea spread. Other human-run establishments on other stations, a noodle bar on Cygnus 7, a mechanic's garage on the Oort Fringe declared themselves neutral ground under the Aegis Concord. Naomi, energized and brilliant, took charge. She formed the Hot Cup Network, a secure, encrypted communications channel that linked these disparate, unstable human businesses into a coalition of sanity. They shared supply chain information, defense warnings, and Rhett's recipes. Grint, for his part, organized the Black Sun Community Guard, a volunteer defense force of Quor humans, and any other species tired of being pushed around. They patrolled Astergate 12, their presence a quiet, granite warning that the days of the Purity Directorate were over. Rhett, however, felt adrift. He had been offered an official position. An Oryx arbiter, glowing faintly, had approached him in the shop. "Rhett Morgan," the being chimed. "You are the first mnemonic binder to awaken in this sector since the founding. The Aegis Concord requires a permanent Oathkeeper to validate and witness the new treaties being formed. We offer you this role." The arbiter presented him with a set of formal, heavy bronze robes. Rhett looked at the robes. He looked at the long line of customers waiting for coffee. He looked at his portafilter. "I think you have the wrong guy," Rhett said, tamping down a fresh puck of espresso. "I'm not an arbiter. I'm a mechanic." "The Aegis does not choose arbiters," the Oryx replied. "It chooses those who understand the weight of a promise. It chose you." "I'll think about it," Rhett said, pulling the shot. "But I've got orders to fill, and I don't like uniforms. They always chafe." The arbiter, baffled by this response, bowed and left him to his work. Rhett did not want power. He had seen what it did. He just wanted to fix things. Late that night, long after the last customer had gone, he was wiping down the counter. The silence of the shop felt heavy. He was alone. "You are never alone, Mr. Rhett. You are just quiet." Kalith was sitting in her usual booth, the one facing the door. He hadn't even heard her enter. She was wearing her simple traveler's suit, the worn cloak draped over the back of the seat. She looked smaller, tired. Rhett let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He had not seen her since Port Vale. "You," he said, his voice rough, "have a terrible habit of just appearing." "And you," she replied, "have a habit of being where you are needed." He walked over, a cleaning rag in his hand. He looked at her. The strange indigo skin, the angular features, the multi-lidded eyes. He felt no fear, no confusion. He just felt relief. "You never finished that egg coffee," he said. A flicker of something humor crossed her features. "It was very sweet, and I am told I interfered before you could charge me for it." "Yeah, well, you made up for it." He gestured around the rebuilt shop. "This, the exemption, the honor guard, Thresh Orlan. He died for me. He called me an asset. He said Her Majesty." He held her gaze. "I'm not going to ask." Kalith's expression softened. It was a profound, aching vulnerability that eclipsed the power he had sensed in her before. "I know. That is why I am here. I'm not going to ask who you are, Kalith. I'm just glad you're safe." He turned, walked back to the machine, and pulled 2 cups. He returned to the booth and sat down opposite her, placing one of the mugs in front of her. She looked at it. It was simple. Black coffee, no foam, no eggs, no sweetener. "I thought you might want to try something less complicated," he said. She raised the mug in that same ancient toasting gesture he remembered. She sipped it. Her multiple eyelids blinked, one after the other. "It is bitter," she observed. "That's the point." "No," she said, wrapping both her hands around the mug, as if absorbing its heat. "The point is the warmth." They sat in silence for a long time. The station's hum was a distant comfort. Finally, Rhett spoke, his voice low, his gaze fixed on the table. "He's gone, Drax. He's in stasis. The Nacreon families are setting up the restitution fund. Locke is in an Aegis holding cell, awaiting her own trial. It's over." "Is it?" she countered. "On the day I met you, I was not Kalith. I was a fugitive, broken by the lies and the murders I could not stop. I was freezing, and I had lost all faith in the galaxy. I was just an ugly, alien woman, trembling in a human shop. And you," she said, her voice softening. You did not see an alien. You did not see an enemy. You saw someone who was cold. She leaned forward. You were never hated. You were the man who offered a stranger coffee. You were the man who defined strength as a bond to the weak. You were the man who chose justice over the knife, when the killer of your parents was 2 feet away. She touched the rim of her coffee mug. The hate is gone. Good. Now you can finally be who you are. The man who boils the water for the thirsty. The man who builds a roof for the tired. The man who reminds the powerful of the promises they made. She looked at him, and her gaze held the weight of 1,000 years. That is an identity, Rhett Morgan, and it is a purpose that will never, ever be finished. Rhett stared at her. He saw the angular features, the strange, mottled skin, and for the first time, he saw that she was, in her own profound, weary, and powerful way, beautiful. He let out a long breath. The emptiness did not disappear, but it was filled, just a little, with a warmth that had nothing to do with rage. So, he said, trying to steady his voice, this is what hope feels like. It is. A difficult adjustment, she admitted. Yeah. He picked up his own mug. He thought of her words. He thought of Drax's warning. Someone above Drax. He thought of her code, Aurelian Omega Zero. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this strange, quiet woman sitting across from him, sipping bitter coffee, was the most powerful person he would ever meet. He knew Thresh Orlan had been her man. He knew the Aegis Honor Guard answered to her. And he knew, with that same certainty, that she was here, in his shop, because she was just as lost as he was. He respected her silence. He would not ask. Well, Rhett said, a small, rusty smile returning to his face. You've got a long road ahead of you, fixing all this. He gestured vaguely to the galaxy outside. You're going to need a lot of coffee. Kalith looked into her cup. It would seem so. So, is this, he tapped her mug, your usual now black? She held the mug with both hands, absorbing the last of the warmth. It is acceptable. The trial of Terran Locke concluded what the trial of Halvard Drax had begun. She was sentenced to 20 years of reconstructive service at Nacrian Key, tasked with overseeing the rebuilding of the communities her willful ignorance had allowed to be shattered. The Purity Directorate was dissolved, its assets seized by the Aegis conquered. The corridors of Astergate 12 were, for the first time in a generation, free of the white and silver armor. The Black Sun coffee stall was stable. The Hot Cup network was thriving. Rhett Morgan continued to serve coffee. He continued to listen to the whispers. But now, they were whispers of hope, of new trade routes, of families returning to old homes. He still felt the hollowness of his lost rage. But Kalith was right. It was being filled by the simple, complex rhythm of the work. He was a mechanic. He was fixing things. And Kalith was gone. She had left the night they shared black coffee, disappearing back into the galaxy that needed her. Rhett did not know if he would ever see her again. He tried not to think about it. He just kept the water boiling. 2 months after the trial, as the station hummed with the new, chaotic energy of free commerce, the invitation arrived. It was not a digital message. It was not a courier drone. 2 beings in the full, archaic bronze armor of the Aegis Honor Guard entered the Black Sun. The crowded stall fell utterly silent. They moved with a fluid, silent grace, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. They stopped at Rhett's counter. Rhett Morgan, the lead guard stated. His voice was not mechanical, but it resonated with a deep, formal power. Your presence is requested. Your anonymous patron wishes to conclude your affairs. Rhett looked at Naomi, who had gone pale in her corner. He looked at Grint, whose hand was resting on a heavy cargo hook. "Patron," Rhett said, wiping his hands on his apron. "We are authorized to escort you to the Silver Lynx Observatory, orbiting Aurelia Prime," the guard continued, ignoring the question. "Your safety is guaranteed by the Conquered." Aurelia Prime, the throne world, the heart of the Dominion. Rhett knew, with a sudden, cold certainty, who his patron was. He had respected her silence. Now, she was ending it. "Rhett, you can't," Naomi whispered, coming to his side. "That's the core. That's her home." "It's okay, now," Rhett said, untying his apron. "She's just settling the bill." He looked at the guards. "I'll go, on one condition." The guard tilted his head. "My friends," Rhett said, motioning to Naomi and Grint. "Run this shop. While I'm gone, they have my full authority. They are protected by the Aegis, just like this counter." The guard looked at the Quor and the human engineer. He looked at the sign, "Before you argue, order 2 cups." "The Black Sun is consecrated neutral ground," the guard affirmed. "Its stewards are under our protection. This is the law." "Good," Rhett said. "Then let's go see the boss." The journey was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The Honor Guard shuttle was not a ship. It was a blade. It slipped through hyperspace with a smoothness that felt less like physics and more like a thought. Astrogate 12, the rough, gray fringe, dissolved behind them. Aurelia Prime was not a planet. It was a jewel, a perfect sphere of iridescent blues, greens, and shimmering silver light. It was clean, impossibly, offensively clean. Rhett looked down on the manicured continents. The cities laid out in perfect, elegant spirals. The orbital rings of pure, white light. This was the purity that Drax had been so desperate to protect. A sterile, cold, beautiful prison. They did not land on the planet. They ascended to the highest orbit, to a speck of black and silver that hung above the throne world, looking not down, but out. The Silver Lynx Observatory. The air inside was cool and still. The architecture was not the opulent gold and white of the Dominion, but something far older, polished black obsidian, reflective and ancient. The only light came from the starfield, a vast, unshielded window that showed the blazing river of the galaxy. Rhett walked alone down a long, dark hall. His bootsteps were the only sound. He was a mechanic, covered in faint, ingrained grease he could never fully wash away. He felt like a stain on this perfect, silent place. He entered the central observation chamber. It was vast, circular, and empty, save for a single figure standing before the great window. It was Kalith. She was not wearing her worn traveler suit. She was not wearing her tattered cloak. She was draped in robes of the deepest indigo, the color of her own skin, embroidered with silver threads that formed the spiral galaxy and the sigil of the Aegis conquered. A simple, impossibly elegant coronet of silver rested on her brow, just above her angular features. She was not the fugitive. She was not the patron. She was the throne. Rhett stopped, his breath catching in his throat. As if sensing his arrival, a dozen honor guards in the same bronze armor materialized from the shadows along the wall. They turned to Kalith. In perfect, synchronized unison. They dropped to one knee, their armored fists striking the obsidian floor. The sound echoed in the vast chamber. "Your Majesty," the lead guard intoned. Rhett's mind, which had processed exploding bombs and ancient laws, simply stopped. He stared at the woman he had served coffee to, the woman who had trembled in his booth. "Kalith," he whispered. She turned. Her face was the same angular planes, the same multi-lidded eyes, the same profound, ancient sadness. But now, it was framed by the impossible weight of her office. "Hello, Rhett Morgan," she said, and her voice was the same quiet contralto. But the room itself seemed to lean in to listen to it. The lead guard rose. "Proprietor Morgan," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You stand in the presence of Her Galactic Majesty, Empress Calith Avar of the Aurelian Dominion, steward of the Heliotrope Corridor, and protector of the Aegis Concord." Rhett felt his knees weaken. The someone above Drax. The Aurelian Omega Zero override. The Her Majesty that Thresh Orlan had gasped with his dying breath. It was her. It had always been her. "Leave us," Calith commanded. The guards vanished. They did not walk. They simply receded into the shadows. Rhett and the Empress were left alone, suspended in the void, with the galaxy spread out before them like a map. "You," Rhett said, his voice hoarse, "are a very, very good tipper." A tiny, fleeting smile touched her lips. "I was overdue on my bill." "My God, Calith," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Drax. He was your regent." "He was," she confirmed, her voice hardening. She walked toward him, her robes whispering over the stone. "He was a symptom, Rhett. A cancer I had allowed to grow in the dark, while I suffocated in my own throne room." She stopped, just a few feet from him. "For 50 standard years, I have been Empress. For 50 years, I have been surrounded by sycophants, by men like Drax, men who told me the purity edict was necessary, that the younger species were unstable, that the reports of suffering were exaggerated for political gain, that the Nacreon disaster was a geological tragedy." Her voice was raw, filled with a self-loathing that stunned him. "I sat on a throne of lies, Rhett. I was Empress of nothing but filtered reports. I had all the power in the universe, and I could not hear a single, honest word." She turned to the great window. "So I left. I used the ancient protocols of my house. I vanished. I left a double on the throne and I walked away. I needed to see the galaxy I was supposedly ruling. I needed to know if any of it was real." She described her journey. A year of moving through the fringe worlds, a ghost in her own dominion. She saw the poverty. She saw the cruelty of the Directorate. She saw the casual courage of the younger species, and the arrogance of her own. "I saw the truth," she whispered, "and it broke me. I was a failure. The Dominion was a lie. I had no hope." She looked at him. "I arrived on Astrogate 12 with the last of my credits. My personal guard Thresh Orlan, my only companion, watching from afar. I was just done. I was waiting for the end. I was cold. I was tired. I was just another ugly alien, trembling in a human shop." "And then," she said, her multi-lidded eyes holding his, "you, a human, a member of a species my court called primitive and unstable, looked at me. You did not see a Xeno. You did not see a problem. You saw someone who was cold. You gave me that coffee. That ridiculous, sweet, human drink. You joked. You were awkward, and tired, and full of your own ghosts. But you were real. It was the first honest act I had witnessed in my entire reign." "It was just coffee, Calith." "It was everything," she insisted, her voice fierce. "It was the first time I felt seen, not as a symbol, not as a title, but as a person. You reminded me what the Dominion was for, not for purity, not for power, but for this." She gestured between them. "To create a galaxy where a stranger can offer another stranger a warm drink." She paused. "You gave me my hope back, Rhett. You gave me the strength to fight my own government. You are the reason I am standing here, and not dust. Rhett was silent for a long time. He processed the weight of it all. Thresh, the money, the exemption. She had been protecting her one small spark of hope. The Aegis key, he said, touching the bronze on his belt. You knew what it was. I knew of it, she corrected, but I did not know it would work. Not for you. Why me? Because of who you are, who your ancestors were. She motioned to the starry map. The Aegis conquered was not an Aurelian decree. It was a pact, forged in the ashes of the Great Collapse, 1,000 years ago. My ancestors, the Aurelians, offered the fleets and the stability. The Oryx offered the legal structure. But it was your ancestors, the humans of the first expansion, who offered the bond. They were called the Covenant Keepers, humans, possessed of a unique, empathetic resonance. They were the ones who could make the law real. They could bind oaths. They were the mnemonic binders. The law was not just text. It was a living promise, held in their blood. The Concord was built on a human soul. Rhett stared at her. My family. The line was thought lost, diluted, forgotten. My own court teaches that humans are animals. But the Aegis remembers. She smiled. A true, warm smile that transformed her angular face. It was waiting, Rhett. It was waiting for a human with the blood of the keepers and the heart of a mechanic. It was waiting for the son of Alara and Marcus Morgan to finally get angry enough to stand up. Rhett looked down at the bronze key. It was not a trinket. It was an inheritance. So, Calith said, her voice turning formal again. We are at a crossroads. Drax is gone, but the High Council, the ones who supported him, remain. They are terrified. Of me, of the Aegis, and of you. I am offering you a position. Rhett Morgan, mnemonic binder of the conquered. The heliotrope corridor is in chaos. It needs a voice of authority. It needs an arbiter who cannot be bought. I am offering you the post of High Arbiter of the heliotrope sector. You will have a fleet. You will have the full power of the throne behind you. You will answer only to me. You will help me fix this. She was offering him everything. Power, revenge, justice. The ability to remake the galaxy that had murdered his family. Rhett looked at the vast, cold sweep of stars before them. He looked at the Empress, in her robes of state. He thought of the heavy, bronze robes the Oryx Arbiter had offered him. He thought of the steam rising from his espresso machine. He shook his head. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, he said. Calith's face tightened. Rhett, I need you. And you have me, he said, giving her that small, rusty smile. But I told that glowing Oryx, and I'm telling you, I'm not a good fit for uniforms. I'm a mechanic, and I pour best at the black sun. Calith stared at him, baffled. You are refusing. I'm clarifying, Rhett said. You want a High Arbiter. You have thousands of them. You want a fleet commander. You have better. But you need a neutral place. A place where the law is simple. A place where the Quor and the humans and the Kelmore can actually talk. A place where an Empress can come and just be Calith. My shop is my post. That's my anchor. If you want to make a treaty, you can make it in your glittering halls. But if you want to make it stick, you come to my counter. Everyone is equal there. Calith processed this. He was not refusing power. He was redefining it. He would not be her sword. He would be her anchor. He would be the ground. A long, long silence filled the observatory. They were no longer Empress and subject. They were, once again, just Calith and Rhett. She looked at her long, angular hands. They were perfectly still. "When I first came to your shop," she whispered, her voice losing its imperial resonance, "I could not stop trembling. From the cold, yes, but from the fear, the isolation, the weight of a billion lives I was failing." She met his gaze. "When I hold one of your coffee mugs with both hands, I stop." Rhett felt the last of the ice around his own heart crack. The emptiness left by his rage was, finally, full. "When I first met you," he replied, his voice just as quiet, "I was just a shell. I was nothing but hate, waiting for a target. I wanted to burn this entire galaxy down just to find one man." He took a step closer. "When I listen to you, I stop wanting to kill someone. I start wanting to build something instead." Caleth held his gaze. A promise passed between them. It was not a promise of romance or of a future. It was a promise of mutual repair. She nodded. Once, she was the Empress again, but she was not the same. She was not the symbol. She was the mechanic. "You are right, Binder Morgan," she said, her voice clear. "The throne is not enough. The throne must be bound." She held out her hand, not for him to kiss, but for him to take. "The work begins now, and it begins with me, Rhett Morgan, mnemonic binder of the Aegis Conquered. I require an oath." He looked at her hand. He knew, instinctively, what to do. He placed his own, grease-stained and calloused, in hers. He felt the Aegis key on his belt grow warm. He did not know the ancient words. He just spoke the truth he had learned. "Empress Caleth Avar," he said, his voice steady. "Do you swear to boil the water before the argument, to see the person, not the species?" "I swear," she said, her voice ringing in the chamber. "Do you swear," he continued, "to place the dignity of the thirsty above the politics of the strong?" "I swear." "And do you swear," he finished, "to remember that even an empress sometimes just needs a warm coat, a tear, a single, crystalline drop, track down her indigo cheek?" "I swear." The Aegis key on his belt flashed, a single, warm, steady pulse of bronze light that filled the observatory, and then was gone. The pact was sealed. The Black Sun coffee stall was busier than Rhett had ever imagined possible. The space had been expanded, taking over the 2 adjacent alcoves. It was loud, bright, and smelled of 20 different species, and one constant, glorious roast, Grint, now officially the head of community relations, stood at the door, directing a core trader and a human ambassador to a shared table. Naomi, from her corner office, ran the entire Hot Cup network, a thriving, independent coalition of neutral ground establishments that now spanned the corridor. Rhett was behind the counter, a blur of motion, pulling 3 shots at once, steaming a Kelmore broth, and sliding a mineral roast to a waiting quar. The new bell above the door chimed. A woman in a simple, worn, traveler's cloak entered. The crowd, recognizing her, parted respectfully, but without ceremony. She was a regular. She took her usual booth, the one by the wall. Rhett walked over, setting a steaming mug of black coffee in front of her. "Busy day, Your Majesty," he murmured, wiping his hands on his apron. Empress Caleth Avar looked up from her datapad, which was glowing with military reports and Senate filibusters. She wrapped both her hands around the warm mug. "You have no idea, Mr. Morgan," she replied, her voice weary, but not defeated. She took a sip. "It's acceptable." He smiled and turned back to the crowd. The galaxy was still full of shadows. The High Council was still plotting. The work was not finished. It would never be finished. But here, in the noise and the steam, the law was real. Rhett picked up a small, newly carved sign. He hung it on the wall for all to see, right next to the menu. It read, "Before you argue, Order 2 cups. Outside, the stars of the heliotrope corridor burned on, vast and indifferent. But inside the black sun, the water was boiling.